mindset that you need to get into is how can we become more insight driven as a recruitment agency.
Meet Haydn Morgans. Haydn is the founder and director of SearchStack, a digital marketing agency that specialises in podcast production. In this fascinating interview for the Recruiting Better podcast, Haydn shares advice for recruiters such as:
3 of our clients say that 40 to 50% of their business development sort of opportunities and new business closed is directly from the podcast.
Haydn explained the transformational effect that recruitment marketing can have on your business and shared tips and insights including...
And again, it just comes down to that storytelling approach, doesn't it? That is the most powerful form of communication you could ever do. You know, ideal situation in the podcast is someone's listening to it, there was a piece of valuable insight that forced them to pull their car over mid-podcast, pull up their notes app on their phone and write it down.
Listen on to find out how you can transform your business with insight-driven content marketing. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Recruiting Better. This time I'm joined by Haydn Morgans. Haydn is the founder of SearchStack, a marketing agency specialising in podcasts, demand generation and websites specifically for the recruitment industry. Haydn, thanks for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure, Ben. We've been kind of sort of back and forth on this podcast a little bit, haven't we? So it's really good to sit down with you and let's have a good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I really wanted to get you on, right? Because the whole thrust of this series of the show has been focusing on business development, marketing and sales, particularly around sales tactics so far. So we've had some excellent guests on the sales side of things. And I really wanted to redress the balance and have a more broad conversation with you about, in particular, the relationship between sales and marketing in a modern recruitment business. And also how recruiters, at almost sort of tactical level, can really understand the purpose of their marketing activity, the purpose of their sales activity, and how to get some clarity in their head about how to achieve those key results of course, generating high quality new business at a consistent kind of rate. So I'm hoping you'll be able to help steer us through some of that and share plenty of good ideas around how recruiters can be tackling that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the other half of it, isn't it, really? And I think sometimes it gets forgotten, marketing. They can sometimes just be that individual in the back office that's posting on LinkedIn or doing some cool things for you. Or maybe it's the just can you do this department. And there is so much potential in marketing, especially in the way that this industry is going and just sort of like the evolution in buyer expectations and just the maturity of the market. So I think when you utilise marketing to your fullest extent as a sales department and merge those together in what we'll probably call the revenue department rather than just sales and marketing, some really cool magic can happen. Yeah,
absolutely. I've heard you say before, and I'd love to dig into this with you, that marketing can be a real superpower for recruiters right now. So what does that kind of mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, really, look, this is just touching on that revenue department thing again. I think sales and marketing can sometimes be really disparate, and I think, you know, from my experience with the podcast and talking to marketing managers and just general, you know, being in this market, you can find that recruitment agencies are very sales heavy, aren't they? They've got very sales heavy capacity to them, and there are maybe 1 or 2 marketers within their business. What happens a lot of the time is I think there's like an old school way of thinking that marketing can just generate leads, or they may just be their own thing, talking to the CEO and just delivering projects. I think the companies that do really well and do have that superpower combine those two together. So they're really utilising the strengths of a marketing department, and usually that is things like copywriting, getting strong messaging down, even web development, design, and understanding the kind of real overarching purpose, vision, mission and the strategy of the business. I think if you can lean on the marketing department and bring that together, then you can really create something that I call sales enablement. So it's easy for sales to go and find leads. I think in this market a lot of the time, I don't think you really require marketing as much anymore to hand you those leads, because they may not even be that great quality, and you'll probably find that a lot anyway. So you'll find as a salesperson going out and getting those leads, what you really want to be able to get the most out of with those leads is actually going and closing them and having everything in your disposal to actually just pitch to win. And marketing can play such a strong role in helping you achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, right the way through this series, I'm thinking as recently as the episode where we had Benjamin Dennehy on the podcast, but all the way through this series, we've been hearing about the importance of targeting a sales message that starts with the problems that your clients experience. Really thinking about how you're going to very specifically target personas or individuals based on the problems that they face. And it feels as though what you're saying there is that rather than almost necessarily generating leads for the business, the marketing team can be creating the copy and the insight and the communication of what those problems are, so that the sales team is best enabled to go out and really kind of communicate those messages in one-to-one conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And from my experience working with marketing departments and doing strategies for recruitment agencies, a lot of the time they'll be scratching their heads trying to find those insights that you've probably just got sitting up there in your head. So as soon as you bring those teams together, the sales can give their insights on the main challenges, the pain points, the hiring cycles, anything that's going on in the market, because you're having those conversations day in, day out. Now, that kind of insight is just unbelievably powerful to a marketing department to then take and use for content, or podcasts or LinkedIn profiles, or giving you ideas for personal branding content, or creating really strong messages or challenge statements within pitch decks and all things like that. But you can't achieve that if they have no idea what's going on, and they may do their market research, but marketers are usually flat out, and they can only get a strategy built to a certain point. So I think being able to provide them with those insights, because you're having those conversations every day, and then they're able to take all that information and all that insight and all that market data, and then spin that into a really nice, well-designed, strong messaged piece of content that you can use to go and build demand and more interest in your service offering.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm going to resist the temptation here to jump in and talk straight away about kind of playbooks and the way that a marketing campaign and sales cycles can overlap. Perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later on. There are a couple of things that you've mentioned in that answer, though, that really stand out to me, which is recruiters on the phone, talking to their clients, listening to challenges, listening to problems, feeding information back into marketing, so that marketing can then go off and build written collateral, events, and podcast ideas, right? Those being the three kind of, I guess, key routes to market for marketers at the moment. You might tell me that there are others besides. But how best does a recruitment business build that link between sales and marketing? Are there any techniques or strategies that you see work really well, or approaches that you recommend?
Yeah, so there's a few techniques. One is the most basic one, and it's just getting an additional field added into the CRM, and maybe it's just pain points or something like that, along the lines of that. And it's an initial question that you build into your conversation. I'm sure any good salesperson worth their weight has probably been practicing and honing their conversation skills and their sort of pitch that they do. So just implementing that into the process, being able to figure out challenges. Another one is timeframes. So a lot of the companies we work with will find that there is usually a big uptick in certain sort of times of the year when projects are moving along. So understanding that information is good, because then you can feed that back to marketing, and then they can plan campaigns that are just hit right at the right moment and just resonate to an extent that you can't get anywhere else. That's the first thing, I think, just implementing it as a process into your CRM. Try and get that data and put it into a spreadsheet, and just you and marketing work collaboratively. I think before I go on to the other ones, the linchpin of this thing is you need to be talking to marketing. You need to be establishing that relationship. I had a really good conversation with Rich Evans a while ago, and he was like, you need to bring your marketer to sit with your sales desks. They need to just be within there. And I think that's a great thing, just actually making that difference in the business. The second one is something we've been playing with, is something like Score App. So having some kind of really cool market questionnaire that you can kind of get clients to and candidates to sort of fill in before you sort of kick off a process is a really good one. And you can ask some targeted questions within there, again, looking at salary ranges, market challenges, growth plans, all things like that, and getting that information and putting it together.
Yeah.
So I think either having a CRM process or having some kind of like questionnaire within what's going on is going to be two strong ways to try and collect that data.
And you kindly recommended a book to me a little while ago, a book by a guy called Daniel Priestley called Oversubscribed. And what I think both of those messages, capturing that information in the CRM and the excellent work that you've been helping me do with Score App as well, is all about capturing signals of intent, right? It's all about capturing those moments of what are our problems, what are our clients struggling with, where are the topics of interest that our clients really want to hear about or need help with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I would definitely recommend for any salesperson or anyone listening, director or whatever, listening to this, to read that book. It was recommended to me by a new client, and I devoured that audio book on the drives in and out of work, and thought, wow, why haven't I read this before? So that is a definite good read, definite recommendation. Yeah, so I think that figuring out the intent is super important, and understanding and building that sort of data set will give you kind of the signals to not only strike while the iron's hot, because you're kind of getting that market research, but then also, like, I'll touch on this a lot, but it's like that pitch to win. A lot of the time you really want like a really well designed pitch deck that hits a challenge, and is kind of bespokely created to what you figured out the main marketing challenges are. When you go ahead and you say within your pitch that this is the market challenge that we know you're facing because we've talked to X number of people within that industry and we've got data to back this up. We know you're having this as well, and we've created a solution to this. That just rises you above any other competition that's trying to pitch for that work as well. And then secondly, what you can do as well is take this data and give it to the senior leadership team and say, look, we need to upgrade our product offering to be able to offer these kind of like consultancy services that to hit these pain points, whether it's something like diversity initiatives or succession management and all things like that. You just need to know this information, otherwise you're just shooting in the dark and hoping it all works.
Yeah, absolutely, and that again is kind of really a really tight correlation to the playbook approach. Which when I talk to businesses about it, right, we're typically saying, okay, what are the problems that your business uniquely solves for your clients, and part of that is getting product market fit. So it's understanding what are your target clients actually concerned about. I was talking to somebody recently about quality of hire analysis, and they were saying that their key market they were thinking about targeting was sales. And that makes sense, because every salesperson that you hire, if you make a good quality hire, that has a great impact on bottom line revenue. And if you make a worse quality hire, then that person doesn't generate as much revenue. What they actually found, though, was that for most sales leaders, the cost of a bad hire was almost not the cost of bad hire, the quality of hire metric was almost baked into their model. So although we don't like to work this way, those organizations, those big sales organizations, were saying, yeah, we know that we're going to hire 10 people and only 3 are going to hit quota. That's baked into our model. So yes, quality of hire matters to us, but maybe it's not as much of a problem as it might be in other places. So then there was this kind of realignment of, right, so which markets really do care about quality of hire? We'd like to think it's everyone, but the reality is it isn't going to be everyone, and it isn't going to be everyone even within a particular segment. So getting that stuff right by using intent, listening to a market, and then feeding that back to the marketing team. I completely understand the value in that. I think you've done a really good job of explaining that. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to touch on, we had a client who was adamant diversity was such a big issue, and after we started implementing these data approaches, we figured out that actually the candidate pool was severely skewed, and it was actually the amount of churn that these companies were having. And once we kind of figured out these challenges, we was able to customize our sort of marketing approach and sort of the emails that went out, the pitches that the clients had, that our client had, and the messaging that they put out, and they had a massive uptick in the amount of people that wanted to retain their sort of services with them, because they changed it around.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. It makes total sense to me that the modern recruitment business would be focusing all of their approaches on how and what types of consultative services to deliver. Um, Again, recent conversations I've had with my clients have been based around what does consulting really mean, and one of the definitions of that we've kind of looked at is helping their clients, so recruiters helping employers transform the way they hire, and anything less than that being kind of a transactional approach, even if it is done with a smile, loads of rapport, and loads of time spent together. If you're selling anything less than a transformation of hiring, then you're really selling a transaction. You mentioned earlier, Haydn, a phrase that will be new, I think, to some of the audience listening, which was the phrase sales enablement. And there's a correlate to this as well, which is this kind of phrase that we hear more and more, which is RevOps or revenue operations. But from my understanding, the work that you do with SearchStack and the kind of conversations you have with your clients have evolved from perhaps where marketing was focused on lead generation more into this idea of sales enablement. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for me, sales enablement probably is the way that we should probably start to approach that marketing and sales, this marketing method of doing things. It is really what it says on the tin. It enables sales to win those cases, and a lot of the time that comes with great design, punchy messaging, again, like things like decks, or providing content that the sales team can use in touch points, creating email nurturing campaigns with pain points and challenges and value, and all those kind of things that marketing can play a super strong role in, and can play a pivotal role in the long buy-in cycle that we usually see in this growing market. As long as you're able to prove that you are confidently adding in touch points along a 6 to 12 sales cycle, that have that marketing have helped play a role in, then that is what I would see sales enablement to be. And then the other part of it is, I think, sales and marketing working together to launch projects and strategies that can help gain attention through things like demand generation marketing, and then allows the sales to then take it at the right moment when the client feels like they've had a bunch of value given to them, and they kind of like owe you really a conversation, or you've been able to convince them on a challenge or a problem that they may not even thought that they actually had, but giving them all that content and being involved in that whole cycle is what I would say sales enablement is.
Yeah, I love that definition, that kind of idea that really everything that we do in sales enablement is all about clearly helping recruiters win, but also helping, crucially, shorten that buying journey, shorten that sales cycle, so that recruiters can win new business quicker. My typical approach to a sales cycle is based on a 3-week cadence, right? And in the background, it's really important that the client has been nurtured to be made aware of the problems that you solve, and also kind of create that awareness and almost, as you say, that sort of that demand around a solution for those problems, which, for example, like you mentioned before, DE&I may just not be something they realise they could be doing better at, or may not have realised that a recruiter could support them with. And there are those kinds of shifts that become really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
What sort of, when you talk about content, and I think as a recruiter, I don't know whether anybody else listening to this recognises this, but as a recruiter, I felt woefully short in terms of the tools and the content I was given. It was all a bit stale. It was all a bit corporate, actually, looking back. And I don't think it necessarily, I never felt that the materials that I was given by my marketing department necessarily helped me shorten the sales cycle or win better clients. We won't go into necessarily why that is unless you want to explore that. But what about right now? What's the sort of content that marketing should be creating for the sales team to really support the kind of the win of big and better clients and reducing that sales cycle?
Yeah, so I think it all comes down to, again, bringing the two teams together. Sales shares the insights that's going on within the market. Marketing brings the knowledge of the purpose, the vision, the mission, the why of the business, and the messaging, and they bring that together and show that this is a huge issue for the client, and we need to create content around this. Whether it's something like a mini podcast series, an ebook, blogs, all things like that can really help sort of get the attention of the market. And I think really, I would agree. I think the issue from it being stale, potentially too corporate, it's just, again, that disconnect that marketing are trying their best, but potentially they don't have all the insights, the data, or the market knowledge they had that you would have as a sales team. So it creates that disconnect, and then it creates that content that doesn't quite resonate. So I think bringing those two together works really well. And then I think, again, working as a team on a project to really run some things that we've done with marketing agencies, with recruitment agencies, is we can do things like companies to watch out for, so you can get the attention of like market leaders. We can run events where you're able to bring in clients or people related to that market and get the content off there. It was all understanding what the big topics are at the moment, and recruitment has a seriously unique position in marketing because they're able to fully embed themselves into a market, but also talk to, there's no sort of like real issue with competitors or anything like that. So you're able to talk to everyone in the market and get all the insights and get all that market knowledge, and then go and share that. And just, I know you say it a lot of the time, but it's like leaning on that, the consultant in recruitment consultant. I don't think they do that a lot of the time. So you just want to establish yourself as a kind of like, a data aggregator, a market analysis company as well as a recruiter. We've had an agency that we work with a lot on this sort of stuff, and they go to trade shows, and some people go, "Oh, you're a recruitment agency. I thought you guys were like market analysts." And there's a really good thing to say. It was like, yeah, we understand this market so well that we can literally find you exactly the right people to fill those roles.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're exactly right. That idea that, a recruiter's secret weapon is the fact they can talk to anybody in their market about pretty much anything, is often underplayed. So it's great to hear the ways that you can bring that to the fore.
Winning high quality new business is more difficult than ever. And as you know, we are strong advocates of using email in your BD outreach. But we also know that using email outreach campaigns is more and more difficult. Google and Yahoo have upped the bar in terms of what they consider to be spam, and so working to create great results from email campaigns is more and more difficult. And if you're sending messages at volume from your primary domain, you really need to be worried about domain health. Not to mention the fact that only the most hyper-relevant, hyper-tailored content is going to get the kinds of responses you want from your clients. Our partner Outstation does all of the heavy lifting for you. It's an amazing tool that runs end-to-end services from data collection through segmentation, through using AI to really target and get specific about who you're sending messages to. Is a real game changer in terms of the way that we use both a combination of technology and that human touch. Outstation goes a level beyond anything that we've ever seen before. And we've got clients all over the world in different sectors across recruitment who are getting fantastic results just from using the tools at Outstation. If you want to check it out, head to the show notes. There's a link there for you. And if you go through to their page, they will give you 15% off a discount from your first order. So go check out Outstation, change your results from your email campaigns, and it'll help you win more business.
And I talk to my clients a lot about those sorts of ideas, running events and building podcasts. Okay, so we've talked for most of the conversation so far, in fact, about articulating challenges and problems, themes in the market, effectively reading between the lines and maybe crystallizing something here. We're talking about how modern marketing in this current market is much less about why an organization, why a recruiter's business is great, and rather than kind of, I guess the old-fashioned maybe perception of marketing is like, how do we create messages that make our company sound great? It's now about how do we create messages that really resonate with our clients and talk to them about their problems and the challenges that they're facing. So rather than talking about why we're great, talk about why we're relevant. But there's an additional element, isn't there, around kind of personal brand and personalization within all of that. And I wonder what you see as being the role for marketing when it comes to sort of personalization and personal brand.
Yeah, so I completely agree. So one of the statements that I always stick to is future, not feature. So you want to see what the you want to sort of give the client or the customer you're working with the idea that they're the hero in your story, and your solution gets them to the end point. So I know sales is quite strong on that kind of thing, and marketing's going to help with that. In terms of personal branding, I think most of us know it's probably one of the most powerful forms at the moment to try and generate business, create demand, and as a consultant within a business or as a sales leader, you need to have a personal brand. Now, marketing can really help you with that. They can come in, they can help you create a plan of action, give you some content pillars to touch on, be able to give you templates, Canva, branded assets, because everything this keeps coming up in my head as we're talking. Everything needs to be branded to the company as well. And sometimes, sales can just get carried away and just start putting together stuff, and it doesn't look particularly great because that's not, usually that's not their skill set. They're amazing selling, but sometimes you just want to bring in those designers just to make sure that everything's all tightened up, everything looks on brand, and that is important. Again, so they can help you with the strategy, they can help you with designing things, they can help you double check stuff, make sure it hits right and it hits the tone of voice that the company has set. And then that gives you a lot more of a platform to be able to just go out there in the market and keep pushing stuff out. The other thing you can do is you can work alongside marketing to get together things like case studies and testimonials and that really strong social proof on the things that you've done well with, because we're seeing in the market at the moment that kind of social proof content is just doing so well. Everyone is competing with each other to a mad extent. So if you can show that you're delivering above and beyond work with data and metrics behind it, as well as a really strong story, marketing again will help you get. You can really just propel your business development opportunities, because you can just put that stuff out there and you can guarantee that someone's going to email you and say, look, let's have a chat, that looks like a great job that you did with that client.
Yeah, I love hearing that, and I think that's so interesting because we've got these real kind of two identities of marketing. We've got this piece around the problems you solve, we've got this piece around personalization, and it's interesting to think that those case studies really sit into that kind of personalization piece, that personal brand piece, where individual consultants can be talking about the great work they've done, but through the guise of giving case studies. And there's a really big piece there, isn't there? I guess you maybe have some thoughts on this yourself about how recruiters actually take and get that kind of feedback from their clients. I'm not sure whether you've got sort of ideas around approaches, strategies and things that recruiters might take in that space.
Yeah, so because we do websites, I'm always pushing for case studies. So we've got a template that we use with most of our clients. So you kind of want a catchy hook, a nice title for the job that you did, things like location, where time to hire, money saved, and then a little bit about the challenge, the brief, and the solution. And if you can really go above and beyond, get some video content from the candidate as well as the client, get a testimonial from both of them or the team that you hired into. That information is important. I would say just strike while the iron's hot. Once you've literally straight off the back of providing a great job or everyone's happy, or when you do your 2-month touch point or something like that, just say, oh, hey, we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a testimonial or helped us build this case study. That'd be great. And just try and make the work as easy for them as possible. So again, work with marketing and potentially pre-write a testimonial for both the candidate and the client and just say, are you happy with us to put this out? Ideally, like I touched on before, video is probably the most powerful form, because then you can repurpose it across loads of different channels and get that out there. But yeah, I think that's a really good one. And another one I heard on a sales podcast I definitely recommend. It's called 30 Seconds to President's Club. Have you heard that one?
It's a great show. Yeah.
And they said that you can kind of use a testimonial as a lever to try and get a little bit, if you're haggling on price, you can always use that, well, yeah, we'll take the price down a little bit if you give us a testimonial post-project, and then go and capitalize on that.
I hear you. Do you know what? There are a couple of things in there that I absolutely agree with. And then there's some elements of that I think recruiters perhaps historically have maybe overcomplicated. And, thinking about in particular getting your clients to give you a video testimonial, right? And if it's okay, I think I might just take a minute or so to break down the approach that I share, and maybe get your feedback and thoughts on this, right? So
Sure.
Typically what I would do as a recruiter is I'd be saying to my client, look, before I ask for a testimonial, I'm saying to my client, it's really important that we understand your experience of working with us so that we can make it better next time. So we can look for continuous improvement. So what I'd love to do is sit down with you and have a really full and frank conversation on Zoom, typically, or whatever platform you use, right? You hit record for the conversation. You say, hey, look, I want to record this conversation so that we can capture the information, make the tweaks, and make the improvements that you want to see. Then you go through your questions. How happy have you been? Now, obviously, if they say it was a horror show, then the conversation goes a different route, and you've got some things to fix. You usually know ahead of time whether that's going to be the case. But so in most cases, you're sitting down with clients who are saying, "Yeah, you did a good job, Haydn. You did a great job for us," and then you're getting your client to explain why, what it was, like what problem you solved for them, what impact that had on the business. And you're talking them through it. And as they share that, they're kind of building the case study through those feedback questions. And at the end of that conversation, you turn to the client and you can say, hey, look, it's been great hearing about your experience. I'm pleased that you've been, so happy with what we've done. There is clearly some things for us to work on and develop, and we're committed to doing that in the future. But I wonder if there would be any reason why you wouldn't be happy for me to share your experience with other potential employers who are looking at which agency they want to work with and trying to make a decision. And I know from experience that these kinds of pieces of feedback really help other employers make better decisions, make clearer decisions as to who they work with going forwards. Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to do that? Now, most employers are going to say, no, there's no reason I wouldn't want to do that. I'm really happy to do that. And you can say, hey, well, look, we've got the recording of this. If I took a little snippet of some of the things you said and sent it over and you felt comfortable with it, would you be happy for me to use that in some of our messaging going forward? The hit rate on that is usually pretty high. Most people say, yeah, that's no problem. You'll get some clients who say, oh, we're not allowed to do that. But where it isn't a contractual issue or a branding issue, most of your clients are going to be pretty much on board. I don't know whether that sort of approach is something that you would feel comfortable with, Haydn, something you might advocate for.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of doing things. Two things I'd say is, clipping and breaking up that footage. Sometimes you may require marketing to help you with that, and putting it in a branded video graphic. And then the second one is, if you've kind of neglected to find that insight that we touched on at the first part of the episode, then try and get some information about the challenges that they had to start off with in the brief, and then you can kind of jot those down as well and put them into your spreadsheet. But yeah, I love that. Great approach.
Cool. So making those case studies really relevant to the challenges that your clients face means that when you take that out to other people, you're speaking to their challenges too. Yeah. Love that. Hey, look, let's move on a stage, right? Let's move on to the idea that someone's listening to this show and they think, God, Ben and Haydn sound good. I'd love to produce a podcast to put out to my market, but I don't really know where to start. So first of all, should recruiters right now be building podcasts, and if so, why?
Oh, no, you get me started. Let's talk about podcasting. I love it. I mean, look, this is our bread and butter. So I'm going to talk very highly of it. But yeah, from our experience, agencies that are starting up podcasting are having an amazing opportunity with business development. We've had actually three of our clients say that 40 to 50% of their business development sort of opportunities and new business closed is directly from the podcast. I think it all just comes down to the proposition that, asking someone to go onto your podcast and have a chat is a great way, firstly, to build that rapport that you sometimes don't get in a phone conversation, do you? And then secondly, it allows you to just like engage people passively. So they might not be looking, but potentially 6 months down the line, because you've had such something like this, a podcast, and sharing that value and building that rapport, it's just such a high level touch point that you're going to stick in their mind, as long as you do a good job, obviously. But when they do have that challenge for hiring, you're going to be the first person to come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds as though there's a big part of the value there is tapping into that passive market as well. So you're not necessarily just talking about jobs and opportunities the whole time, but you're talking about things that candidates who would not otherwise have a conversation with you will find interesting. Have you got any thoughts on the sorts of topics that podcasts in the recruitment space might touch on?
Yeah, so I think it is a great opportunity, especially if you're if you're a niche recruiter, then you can really tap into that niche market and sort of build a bit of a following and an audience around that. The one that always sticks with me and the advice I give is we work closely with Andy Davis, who has the Data X podcast. So he does data center recruitment, and obviously he said to me, like, if I'd have just done a really technical podcast, it would have been a bit difficult for me, firstly, because it's a super technical market. So, and there was already some out there, and they just came across really boring and bland. He focused on the stories of the people within those markets, and again, it just comes down to that storytelling approach, doesn't it? That is the most powerful form of communication you could ever do. So if you're able to have a meaningful conversation with someone in that market, it's great. And I think if you, over time, you develop a bit of a knack for getting the right answers from people, getting the right understanding, and getting those good stories. Everyone has got a good story to tell, unless they've lived in a basement their whole life. And I mean, that's probably a good story as well, but to end up like that. But yeah, there's always a good story. There's always ups and downs. There's always challenges. Life is not a linear progress. It is ups and downs, isn't it? So, and if you can kind of eke that information and also share value and insights, then you've got a great opportunity there. And I think the real value of podcasting is, I always say, it's not about the amount of listeners, it's about the content you can get out of it. A lot of the time you can repurpose these episodes into like LinkedIn newsletters, video clips, put 6 months worth of episodes together and create a playbook or an ebook or something along the lines of that. LinkedIn posts, Twitter threads, all that sort of stuff. You can put it all together and gives you a ton of content to share out anyway. So I think that is probably one of the most beneficial parts to running a podcast. A lot of the time, especially consultants will think, oh, that's down to the founder. That's the founder brand thing to do. But actually, we've got 2 clients where they've actually broke their company up into these specialist sectors, and it's each of the sector desks that are running their podcasts, and then it gives them a great opportunity to map out the market, talk to all the decision makers and the experts within that industry, and it doesn't get kind of, a lot of the time recruitment agencies will have multiple sectors that they're hiring in, so if you can kind of niche it down per sector, you can have like quite a powerful sort of business development tool as part of your arsenal.
Yeah, I hear that completely. I just want to kind of pick up on a couple of points in there. So,
yeah, I went through a lot there, didn't I? So let's break that down.
Yeah. It's all good. There's loads to unpack.
You touched on my passion point.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for all the right reasons. Clearly, I'm an advocate too. So like we're preaching to the choir here, right? But but one, regardless of what happens with your podcast, reaching out to people who you want to interview and talk to and create conversations with, the podcast creates a great opportunity for doing that. Number 2, you're talking to passive candidates. You're giving your kind of network, your community of talent, your talent pool, a reason to listen to your voice and your name, even when they're not looking to move roles or looking to hire, right? And then point 3, when you have got that content, you can then carve it up and use it in so many different channels, not just in the podcast itself, but right across all of your social channels, all of your marketing, your case studies, ebooks, and all of those sorts of approaches. So it really gives you a huge amount of value for what actually, and I get why it doesn't feel like this, but the heavy lifting when you've got, with the benefit that I've got of having Search Stack behind this show, or any support from an internal marketing team, it's actually a lot less work than you think. And the thing that I'd probably say, and you might echo as well, Haydn, is recruiters are interviewing their candidates and clients all the time. So actually a podcast interview is really is not at all dissimilar from running a sales meeting or qualifying a candidate or even taking a job brief when it comes down to it.
Honestly, you're a ready-made guest as a consultant. If you're a good salesman, then you're gonna have an amazing time. You're able to drive that conversation. Another thing I'll touch on as well would be something we call audience tracking. So when you've got guests, influential people in that market, usually you're gonna create these assets, or you're gonna obviously have them on the podcast. So a lot of the time when you go live with the episode, they'll share it out. They'll go out to their huge LinkedIn network, I'm sure some people, and then start listening to your podcast, and it just kind of grows like that. And then also what happens is you build that sort of connection over LinkedIn. So a lot of the time, my previous guests from my podcast, and we see it with clients as well, they'll just start liking and commenting on that stuff, and then you engage back with them, and it builds that digital relationship as well. So it's a great way to just stick that stuff on steroids, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I tell? I want to share a personal story about the results that I've seen in the last few months since pushing this and since working with you guys, because I think it's really indicative of what's possible. So I honestly don't know how much of my business in the last few months has come off the back of people responding to things I've shared on the podcast. But what I do know is more and more of the people that I speak to now say, we saw you on LinkedIn, we listened to the podcast, and then we got in touch. And so almost kind of triangulating, creating another platform for your voice to be heard, I think for me has been the biggest shift. And where I've been really active on LinkedIn for a long time, actually having that additional channel now kind of almost creates that increased credibility and that increased footprint in people's minds, which has led to a higher volume of conversation. So if you're a recruiter out there with a strong LinkedIn presence, then actually shifting to and maybe thinking you don't need to do a podcast because you're really strong on LinkedIn, I think the benefit of having those two working in tandem is really huge as well.
Yeah, and it touches on the oversubscribed book. So it's the one thing that he talks about is the 7-11-4 approach. So it's 7 out. You need to to be able to convince a client and make yourself an oversubscribed business. Find out what that means by reading the book. But you need to have 7 hours worth of interesting content, whether that's through podcasts, videos, blogs, etc., like that, so they can learn about your company and the values that you have, as well as the value that you can offer, and just sort of insight into the market. And then you need to really sort of hit about 11 interactions with that person, and then you also need to have them on 4 different places. So whether that's a podcast episode, listening to a podcast episode, having the call with them, getting them along to an event, all things like that. So try and hit those numbers can really sort of make the difference in terms of getting that person interested in your business and your product offering. And a podcast can play a huge role in making that happen, really, because actually the time commitment of doing a podcast compared to creating 7 hours worth of YouTube content is much different, and you're probably gonna have a much better time doing a podcast.
Yeah, and this is it, right? I mean, the podcast also, in terms of those places where people can find you, is a 2-for-1. Because you've got your audio on whichever channel people listen to their podcasts on, and then you're building a YouTube channel at the same time. So it's for me it seems like a real no-brainer. I understand all the reasons why recruiters would be maybe reluctant to get started, but my recommendation is they try it and see how they go.
Standing out in your sector is becoming harder than ever. Lots of people are making noise, saturating the market with the same old droll tones. So if you want to stand out, it's time to start a podcast. Yes, there's loads of podcasts out there, but how many of them are actually in your niche? Do any of them speak to your perspective on the market? I didn't think so. Podcasting not only sets you apart as an innovative thinker in your market, it is great content for repurposing. Here at Search That, we help you become the voice of your industry. We can stretch your content and turn it into a content goldmine, leveling up your personal brands and recruitment marketing in the process. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, to find out more, head over to searchdat.co.uk/podcasts.
And on that point, maybe kind of a sort of a final question on this would be, are there kind of a starting set of tips, like a handful of tips that you would give people in terms of how to go about getting started with a podcast?
Yeah, so there's a few approaches. So you probably want to think about sort of map out your market where you want to sort of recruit, figure out where you want to have the podcast sort of aimed at, and then think about a really strong mission statement. So a lot of the time, look, we've talked about how a podcast can be great for business development and sort of help the overall business objectives, but also that will come across very transactional in a podcast if that is kind of the only thing you're thinking about. So actually thinking about how you can tangibly change the market with the guests that you're having and the audience that you really want to match with, and that's going to create a strong mission statement. For example, my one skill point, I'm on a mission to level up the recruitment marketing industry. So I'm always thinking about that, the audience, and what I could do to just level them up. An ideal situation to me, and I say this to every guest, ideal situation in the podcast is someone's listening to it. There was a piece of valuable insight that forced them to pull their car over mid-podcast, pull up their notes app on their phone and write it down. If I can achieve that, that's job done. So it's quite tangible with something strong like that. And then secondly, I think it's figuring out a guest list. So an ideal 30 to 100. So Robert Hanna, Legally Speaking podcast, he says, get a dream 100 and tier them up. So one day you'll be talking to a celebrity, but who's in your immediate network. And Hisham, he's got a 30 guest approach. So the first 10 is friends, potentially colleagues, immediate network, people that you know are going to be good on the podcast. And then it's going to be 10 potential clients, candidates, people in the market that you kind of might know, or you may need to reach out to and get on there. And then the last 10 is influencers in your space. Find some people with existing followings that you can bring in and have some good conversations. That gives you your 30 guests. And then my little upgrade for that is also at the end of each episode, just ask each person, is there anyone that you think I should be speaking to with this kind of content? They'll usually recommend one or two people, and then over time you can just curate a little bit of a flywheel of guest reach out. Another little tip is, we both do it, is set up something like Calendly. So when you do your reaching out with clients or potential podcast guests, you're able to just get that process really streamlined. They can book in when it's convenient for you, and then you can just get the podcast going. Another tip is booking in maybe a 20-minute session before the podcast goes live, not directly before, maybe a couple of days before, just to talk about the format and just figure out what's super passionate to them. And so then you can create a bit of a question list and a bit of a format to prepare them. Adds a little bit of a professional sort of edge to the thing, and allows you to write out a podcast question list that's going to really resonate and play to their strengths. Those are the sort of tips I'd say. I guess there's equipment as well. So I would say the two best things you want to invest in is about £200 investment. I would say a Blue Yeti mic. I've got one right here, and a Logitech Brio webcam I'm using at the moment as well. £200, maybe even less now. So those will get you started, and then it's just booking them in. Have that pre-conversation, talk about the content, got a strong mission statement, and just practice. Things don't need to start off perfect straight away. They can be rough, and then they can just improve over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I think there's some really, really good advice there, actionable things that recruiters can go away and get started with straight away. Must touch on the fact that both you and I do something slightly unconventional, right? Which is solo episodes. So you've got your bonus level episodes, and I've got my my regular kind of solo episodes that slot in between interviews. What prompted you to do the solo episodes as well as the interviews?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think part of it is a bit of selfishness. Look, a lot of the time I'll have guests and we'll be stretching that content, repurposing it into clips, and that doesn't really give me much screen time. So being able to touch on something, jump on my soapbox, or give some actionable insight for 30 minutes really helps to sort of propel my own personal brand. I think as a recruiter as well, you could easily do stuff like this. So talking about hiring advice or market insights, things that are going on at the moment, and just sort of building your credibility in the market will really help. So I think that's kind of the reason to do it. Another reason was I did initially start off with a cadence of an episode a week. So I was kind of this was an an easy one to chuck in there without needing to focus so much on getting loads of guests. But I did actually make a rug from my own back, so I've actually changed that to like one every 2 weeks now. And that's a huge piece of advice. Be really honest with yourself about, how many of these podcast episodes can you do? So because the consistency and the cadence is super important. So you don't want to just like release 4 in a month and then you're really struggling because you got to hit your deals by the end of the month. So your podcast just goes to the bottom of the list and then you only get one out next month. That can really kind of put you on shaky ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And always make sure that you give if you're working with a marketing team on it, always make sure that you give your marketing team enough time to edit and get all the bits produced so that you can get the show out on that regular schedule as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, why did you do a solo episode?
Similar kind of reasons, right? So actually the whole of the first series for me was just me talking to camera, talking to the microphone, talking about different challenges that I was seeing from the industry. There's a great podcast that I've always really enjoyed by a guy called Cal Newport called the Deep Questions podcast, and I very much borrowed / stole his kind of format where he takes questions from his community and gave tactical answers to them, and it just felt like a really natural fit with the space that I sit in. So yeah, it was quite kind of selfish in a way, but it's been well received. And that's the other thing that I probably think about is the way that the podcast started out isn't the way it's going to finish, and we're constantly iterating, and we get loads of really good feedback. In fact, if you're listening to this and you haven't left a review, please do, whether that's 1 star or 5 stars, to give us an indication of which direction we should take things in going forwards. We read them all, and they're always really greatly appreciated. So yeah, little plug for getting some feedback there, please.
Nice.
I think that's pretty much the main thrust of the questions that I have for you today, Haydn. Is there anything that you feel we haven't touched on that you'd like to kind of add in closing?
I would say a little thing that popped into my head when we were talking is that I think the main theme of what we've discussed throughout this whole podcast is kind of that being an insight-driven recruitment agency. If you do launch a podcast, it's a really good opportunity to work backwards and figure out, what kind of information do I need? If you're talking to people that are relevant and potential clients, you can sort of ease in nice questions about their challenges, what they're overcoming, what they're thinking about at the moment. Then they can then go and inform everything else and stuff that you can give to marketing to create good content, as well as how then you do better content going forward, and everything in between there. I think that is the mindset that you need to get into. Is how can we become more insight driven as a recruitment agency? I think when you start to understand that a little bit more and start to really map out your market and what's really, finger on the pulse kind of stuff, you can really give yourself a lot more clarity in what you're going to talk about, as well as what you're going to create.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done a good job. I think you've done a great job today of inspiring and providing insight and tactics that people can use to level up their marketing, level up their revenue generation, and also kind of level up their recruitment game as well. I think there's a real range of great value in this episode. I'm really grateful for you to jumping on the show. Thank you, Haydn.
No, thank you for having me on. I was a bit worried because it's like a different audience that I usually play with, but hopefully I've given some good advice and things that are always rattling around in my head around this sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to get in contact, where's the best place to find you?
Oh, where do you think? LinkedIn. just let me out. So either my company Search Stack or my name Haydn, Haydn, no E, no O, no U, no A, just Haydn Morgans, and I should come up as a bit of an unusual name.
Perfect, excellent. And I encourage everybody to have a look, speak to Haydn, check out Search Stack, and level up your marketing. Haydn, thank you.
No, thank you, Ben.
Just one last thing from me. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, hit like, hit follow, and consider leaving a review. Your feedback is really greatly appreciated. We're still looking to perfect the format and to think about how we can make this show even more valuable for all of our audience. So as you leave feedback, we pick it up and we'll be including it in everything we do going forwards. And if you want to get closer to the show, to to ask me questions or hear about upcoming guests and put questions to them, then head to the show notes where you'll find a link to the Recruiting Better community. From there, you'll be able to get our newsletter with regular updates and send me any messages or feedback that you want me to receive.